Can a budget phone beat a flagship when it comes down to camera quality? Usually, the answer is no. But this time, the very popular DxOMark website has got us intrigued. According to them, the new OnePlus Nord 2, which stands at only $400, has slightly better camera results than the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, which costs $1,300. Many people are looking for bargains when it comes down to newly released phones, so we decided to take a deeper look to find out the truth for ourselves. The results were very surprising. Come on aboard, and it's time to let the facts speak. While shifting through these portrait photos, it's worth mentioning that the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, just like the other Sony phones which are made with their cameras in mind, have a different style of photography. What we're looking at is a lot less sharpness and a lack of artificial processing. Now, while this can be good in some circumstances, it can also be the exact opposite. Smartphones often need the software to make adjustments to their shots, especially when there are issues with, for example, there being too many shadows, or some colors coming out wrong because of the angle, or the light, or even lack of it. Even though I'm loving how natural some photos of the Sony are when the conditions fit the software perfectly, I'd prefer some adjustments made to remove the red tint from the overall complexion of the photos, and also to keep the original color of my black jacket, for example. The OnePlus Nord 2 also has its positives and negatives, but what is more important is that it manages to keep the consistency so you know what kind of photos you're gonna see. Regardless of the results of the main cameras, I'll have to break the tie because of the portrait selfies. The front camera on the 1 Mark III is really underwhelming, and while I do know that the main point of this phone is to take photos with the rear camera, there should still be an opportunity to take half-decent selfies, which is what the Nord 2 lets us do. Therefore, the first point goes to OnePlus. Slow motion is fairly decent. Nothing special, as I'm sure you've all gotten used to by now. The feature is quite good on many flagships, or should I say, good as it can be with no one wanting to put in the extra effort to improve it. Usually, I prefer to go in the direction of the phone that can record slow motion at a higher FPS, and at the same time, look for phones that have more options to choose from. Even though the OnePlus Nord 2 can record 720p with 240 FPS, the Xperia 1 Mark III can record slow motion in 4K with just 120 FPS. The video quality is just so high, and that's really something we're not used to seeing in slow motion shots. Since this feature isn't extremely coveted like some of the other modes and the visuals of the Nord 2 is also subpar, I'll hand this point off to Sony for its excellent video quality. Speaking of quality, it would be great if you could sub to our channel for more quality content. Now, I definitely remember some of you being mad at me because of the macro camera comparison in the other video when I talked about the Oppo Find X3 Pro, but the reality is there's a huge difference between a micro and a macro camera. Macro photography is a trend these days, and if the phone doesn't have it, then it should at least be able to emulate it. Do you know how? You might if you watch their comparison with the Google Pixel 6 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. The OnePlus Nord 2 is in the same boat as the Pixel, as they both don't have a dedicated macro camera, nor a macro mode to utilize the ultra-wide camera. So what do? You just pop the optical zoom, take a step back, and voila! Amazing macro pictures from the Nord 2. The 1 Mark III has a macro mode which shows up on the screen when you get too close to an object, but half the time, you're not even sure if it's working or not. Its optical zoom doesn't help the quality change too much either, which does tell you that this phone wasn't created with macro in mind. Neither was a Nord 2, but it's able to pull through with a good result nevertheless. And here we have another audio test for you guys. This one is specifically between the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III and the OnePlus Nord 2. What we're trying to see is the audio capabilities of these phones, as well as if they have any noise cancelling to dim down the background noise. So, tell me what you guys think. Try to recall what I said about the portrait mode photos and you might realize some persisting issues with both devices. While sharpness added on by software is getting to be quite stereotypical of all phones, they do overdo it sometimes. I'm really liking the softer photos of the Sony, but I'm equally disliking this dark and blue hue present in some of the pictures. Color correction is missing, causing black and in some situations gray, coming out something close to a navy blue color. Even though the details are much easier and enjoyable to spot, along with nice dynamic range, I feel they're quite close to each other, except when we get to the ultra-wide mode, where the 1 Mark III just blows the Nord 2 out of the water. There's a big difference in quality due to the lenses, especially when you pay attention to the buildings and palettes right behind me, as Sony manages to produce high quality imaging with its impressive ultra-wide lens, which will give the 1 Mark III the point for this section. Now here's something that I found particularly interesting, and I wouldn't necessarily say in a good way. We always use the ultra-wide lens for stabilization, since the software is most likely going to be the same and the main camera will be too close for comfort. But After doing the test, the Nord 2 was shaking like crazy, leading us to believe that the ultra-wide camera doesn't have optical or electronic image stabilization, which also turned out to be not true. Apparently, the Nord 2 does have electronic image stabilization for its ultra-wide camera, but OnePlus has it hidden so well so that you just can't find it. You've got to scroll all the way to the right of the options in the camera app, click on more, and then select the movie mode. There, you have stabilization for your ultra-wide needs. No idea why OnePlus thought that this was a good idea, but I honestly think they should have included it in the main camera app as well. Either way, the Sony is just better overall with 4K, while the Nord 2 can only do a maximum of 1080p on ultra-wide. Both video quality and stabilization favor Sony in this category, so well done to them. That's a lot of info I just gave, so here's some more information that I've dug up just for you. The OnePlus Nord 2 has a 2x optical zoom, which is quite amazing to have on a phone at this price range. No surprise that it looks better than the Sony at 2x, as the really dark colors of the Xperia is taking away the interest of the concept. But then you've got the 2.9 and 4.4x optical zooms of the Sony. When they kick in, any kind of hybrid zoom is unlikely to be able to compete with these numbers. The oil painting effect of the Nord 2 comes into play just like how we saw with the iPhone after 5x, and the One Mark III is still showing us good results. Even at max zoom, the statue and its details look very realistic, whereas the Nord 2 software is struggling to iron out the discrepancies of the blurriness of the image. Kind of easy to decide which way this one went, to be honest. When it comes down to zoom, I'll take Sony any day of the week. For autofocus though, I'll take Apple any day of the month. They're not here though, so let's see which phone they'll be proud of. And would you look at that, instant reactions from the Nord 2 every time the iPhone comes into view. The One Mark III just sits still at half of the shots and doesn't shift the focus from the background to the iPhone even in the slightest. I'm quite impressed with the performance of the Nord 2 in this category, so well done to them. How about them reels? Currently, videos are a pain, as you're most likely not gonna get the footage you want with this weather, but it's also good for pushing the software to the limit. The habit of the One Mark III not artificially processing its shots is clearly visible, and I'm loving the soft textures and attention to detail. Not so much loving the blue tint that just won't quit when there's a lack of light or too many shadows, but oh well, you can't win them all. It's still much better quality than the Nord 2, especially when you switch to the ultra-wide camera. Similar to the selfie lens of the One Mark III, it seems like OnePlus did not give much attention to their ultra-wide cam, so there are definitely issues in dynamic range and the quality in general, making it unable for me to even compare the footage, leaving the Xperia the clear victor of the video category. Last but not least, photos in the dark. I feel that the refusal of the One Mark III to process the photos is gonna cause the most trouble when taking pictures at night, because the problem with shadows will most likely become an even greater problem. Instead of the blue hue we saw in the daylight videos, we're seeing a yellow tint added on by the software. Combined with the lack of sharpness, which usually is needed to smooth out the images in bad lighting conditions, the Xperia is obviously struggling, especially with the shadows. On the other hand, I've got to admit that the Nord 2's photos and videos don't look natural, but this is a problem with pretty much all phone cameras in this day and age. Furthermore, I think the majority of us would prefer unnatural but usable pictures when showing our friends or putting them on social media. So while I do appreciate the effort of the Xperia trying to keep things natural, this obviously doesn't work out too well during the nighttime because of how desperate the shutters are in trying to capture some light. I can safely say that the Nord 2 edges it out in footage taken during the night. Well, what do y'all think? There's definitely room to praise OnePlus for being able to create a camera phone of this quality for only $400, but it's also good to remember that the Sony camera phones are in another lane in terms of professional photography, and they're more suited to be saved in RAW format and edited manually on the computer with advanced software. Overall though, if you're looking for a budget phone that you can snap decent pictures with, I believe that the OnePlus Nord 2 could be a great phone for you. If you like this comparison, feel free to drop a like and sub to the channel. Please? Thank you. Take care my guys, and see you in the next one.